The Flying Sligs are the airborne cousins of the most frequent enemy encountered in the Oddworld games, the walking sligs. There's actually quite an interesting history when it comes to the Flying Sligs, and they're going to be in Oddworld Soulstorm. So it'd be worth taking a more in-depth look at these rather unique enemies. I say they're rather unique because, unless I'm mistaken, they're the only enemy in the Oddworld gameplay to have the ability to fly. I'm probably forgetting something really massive there, like from Stranger's Wrath or something, but whatever. Other than the ability to fly, Flying Sligs are notable due to their different weaponry they use compared to their grounded blunderbuss-wielding brothers. In Oddworld Exoddus, Flying Sligs use a grenade launcher to kill their targets. Originally shown in concept art, they were going to literally carry massive concrete bombs around. Concrete bombs are like this one here, used by a World War II German aeroplane, the Stuka, which potentially might have been some inspiration for this idea. In Oddworld Soulstorm, however, they've apparently upgraded this quite a bit to a frickin' minigun. Like seriously, a minigun. How are they even able to maintain flight while not only having the weight of the minigun added onto their harness, but also not get disrupted by the recoil from firing it? I mean, where do the thousands of bullets come from anyway? The Vikers have clearly been making great advancements in their technology. These Flying Sligs have so far been seen in cutscenes of Oddworld Soulstorm, and not much has been shown of how they'll work in the gameplay, but there has been a small snippet that has been shown of one flying out of control. As opposed to wearing the robotic legs or pants regular Sligs wear, Flying Sligs are fitted with a flying harness controlled with a joystick, also built by Vikers Labs. Going back to World War II aircraft, when Royal Air Force pilots talk about the Spitfire, they often say something like, "You don't pilot a Spitfire, you strap it on." And that's essentially how a Flying Slig harness is, and how I imagine it sort of feels, I think. Or at least it seems to give off that vibe to me anyway. However, there are not just 2 but 3 different variants of this harness that have been seen. The next thing I'm about to say, for some reason I've always personally found to be one of the most fascinating things I ever read about Oddworld, and I'll tell you why in a minute. The Flying Sligs seen in Oddworld Exoddus with the helicopter blades are actually not the first version of the Flying Slig that are seen in the game. The prototype for the Flying Slig harness had wings that flapped to keep the Slig in the air instead of the blades. These machines were very unreliable and had many problems, and were phased out in favour of the more advanced helicopter versions. Now usually, you see like this sort of stuff and it's just concept drawings and whatever, but the reason I find this so interesting is because it's actually seen in the game, but most people probably didn't even notice. I didn't until I read it and then went back and had a look, and I was amazed that they'd snuck this in. The first Flying Slig ever seen in the game is wearing the prototype wings. That's this Slig here, and as you can see he flies down and says "Something smells," and flies off screen where an explosion is then heard. Interjection here, I've just gone back to check the scene again and there's no explosion. I think I was being affected by Gandhi's revenge, the Mandela effect. Where someone remembers something as being different to where it actually was. For some reason I remember Abe dropping down and then boom, you hear the standard explosion sound and screen shake of the game, signature to an explosion having just happened. I've just watched multiple Let's Plays to check and it apparently doesn't happen, so there we go. I'm still holding out hope that actually it happens on the PS1 version and not on the PC version, but it probably doesn't. I'm probably just remembering it wrong. That's apparently because the smell was the lubricant in the wings failing, causing them to stop moving, and he subsequently crashes, causing the explosion. As I wrote that, I'd only just read that now for the first time in a few years, and I remembered it as the smell being the fuel or oil leaking or something from the harness, causing the wings to stop working due to being out of fuel, which causes it to crash. But I'm probably just remembering it wrong. It's basically the same thing pretty much anyway. This scene is literally seconds before gameplay in Exoddus starts, so considering it's also the first ever Flying Slig that's seen in the Oddworld games, I consequently feel that it's sort of an underratedly good way to introduce them to show, you've defeated the Sligs in Abe's Odyssey, now look at them in this game, they can fly now. Plus, Flying Sligs aren't seen in gameplay until a bit later, I think, unless you know of the secret area that's hidden on the first screen, in which, who knows, maybe it was that Flying Slig that we just saw, but this one seems to have blades, so that's also another good way. So literally the first Slig you see, if you know about the secret area, is a Flying Slig. In Abe's Exoddus, the Slig's harness can be acquired by crawling Sligs via a Get Your Wings machine. It's possible that the name Get Your Wings is a relic from when they were meant to have wings instead of blades. Maybe I'm wrong, it's just an interesting word choice instead of something like Get Your Blades or something, or maybe even something more generic. These machines are very rare, and unless I'm mistaken, I believe only one ever appears in the game, but I could be wrong about that. The Slig's harnesses have been given an upgrade yet again in Oddworld Soulstorm, where they're seen with a helicopter pack with only 3 blades as opposed to 4. But after all, this is complemented by a freaking jet engine. I mean really, a jet engine. I do wonder if all Flying Sligs are like this in Soulstorm, or maybe these are just like the elite Flying Sligs with the normal ones in the gameplay. Considering they're flying after a high-speed train, it makes sense that these are just like the flying squad of the Flying Sligs designed to quickly get to places and subdue fugitives fast, because honestly, Sligs going out fast with that maneuverability and power is going to be pretty difficult to fight against in the gameplay. Imagine if these were in Abe's Exoddus whizzing about the screen shooting everything up. It'd have been bloody mayhem. Then again, it would have been fun to possess one. Now I assume to be a Flying Slig you'd have to be pretty elite. I mean, if you're essentially strapped and trapped to helicopter blades, you can't exactly be falling asleep on the job like most Sligs, or you'd probably crash and blow up. Yes, that's right, simply the act of not falling asleep makes a Slig elite. They have really high standards. My assumption of the necessity of the Flying Sligs to need to be high class is essentially confirmed in a post from the Oddworld website from the 3rd of December 2013 titled They're Not 18, Charge of the Not Very Bright Sligade. In this post, Krieg the Slig, a one-armed Slig who occasionally contributed to Dear Alf, takes a look at some fan art of Sligs. On one drawing of a Flying Slig, he notes, "He's got the glare and elitism in his eyes that those flyboys need." I mean, look at this one. Clearly he's elite. He's literally the only Slig smart enough to avoid possession by, just moving off screen. Mind you, this Flying Slig next door wasn't very smart. Which brings me on to accidents. I can imagine that no matter how elite they are, Sligs flying about with harnesses and grenade launchers is a recipe for trouble, and consequently they're probably the most dangerous Sligs that exist, both to their enemies and themselves. As a result, it makes me wonder whether Flying Slig harnesses were developed very quickly by the Vikers out of necessity to combat the threat of Abe during Abe's Odyssey, hence why we see a prototype version at the beginning of Abe's Exoddus prior to seeing the fully fledged helicopter ones. It sort of suggests that they're developing and upgrading them very quickly as they go along, and deploying them without proper tests just to get them out there or something. It's a theory anyway. Finally, the Flying Sligs are also notable for wearing pilot masks, again similar to what was used in World War II. I think when designing the Flying Sligs they took heavy inspiration from the Second World War and that sort of thing, military aircraft of that era. I think maybe that was also why they changed these Sligs from having wings to propeller blades as well. I mean, it's possible that they were always intended to have helicopter style harness. Then again, what would have been the point of making and showing winged harnesses at the start of the game, considering the rapid development of Abe's Exoddus? Ironically, much like my theory about the Vikers just making the harnesses and getting them out there, I wonder if the plan was originally to have the Sligs in gameplay use the wings as well, and as a result assets were made like the Get Your Wings dispenser and that initial cutscene that made it into the final game before they decided to use blades instead. Maybe because having Sligs with wings feels, at least to me, a bit too fantastical? Is that the right word? Fanciful? Something like that. Like, it seems sort of like more of a fantasy thing, whereas to me it makes more sense if you're giving Sligs the ability to fly to have them use helicopter style machinery. It seems way more industrial and realistic. Although I do think that the early wings were based on like the Wright brothers biplanes and that sort of thing. And it just makes sense for them to be using something with an engine and an exhaust and all that. It just suits the industrial aesthetic way better than the idea of them using wings, in my opinion anyway. The aviator masks are mainly worn by Flying Sligs to protect them from harsh conditions and debris, which is quite important if you're whizzing about everywhere. I imagine it also protects them from getting flies in their eyes, or whatever the old world equivalent of flies is. They'd probably call them flies, like with a PH and a Z or something like that. This version of the mask became so popular due to its superior depth perception that grounded Sligs started wearing variations of them, with the Flying Sligs looking like a more traditional pilot masks with far larger goggles. There was apparently concept art from Abe's Odyssey that showed normal Sligs wearing this type of mask instead of the heads-up display visor they ended up wearing in Odyssey. If I recall correctly, I've heard that Lorne Lanning wanted all Sligs to wear this mask in Abe's Exoddus to make them appear more expressive or motive or something. However, because the game was rushed, this only occurred in cutscenes, with the Flying Sligs being the only ones in actual gameplay to be shown wearing the pilot mask. In universe, this can be attributed to the pilot masks being much better than the heads-up display visor all Sligs in Abe's Odyssey wore, and therefore they're likely more expensive and harder for Sligs to get, resulting in mainly high-ranking Sligs, ones that are generally shown in cutscenes, such as Glucken's personal servants being the first to receive them. Eventually these masks are phased in as a standard, and by Oddworld Munch's Odyssey all Sligs, at least seen in the areas of that game, are equipped with them. Apparently the lack of depth perception in the heads-up display masks caused Sligs to accidentally fall to their death, hence why the pilot masks became standard. I just had a theory that what if the Sligs falling to their death was actually caused by Abe possessing them in Abe's Odyssey, but this sudden rise of deaths in Sligs was initially attributed to the masks, and as a result Vickers quickly developed the pilot mask and phased it in as a replacement beginning by the start of Abe's Exoddus. I feel like I'm doing a lot of theorising in this video, but you know, there's not a lot to go on, so it's just fun to try and fill in the gaps yourself. Speaking of the rushed development of Abe's Exoddus, I really like how Oddworld Inhabitants still put in details, like slightly different dialogue for the Flying Sligs to differentiate them. Like when they kill you, and instead of making those BS noises normal Sligs do, they say, "Gotcha." Gotcha. I bloody love it when they say that. The Flying Sligs of Oddworld Soulstorm appear to have retained the exact same mask by the looks of it, so now that they have super speed jet harnesses with a Gatling gun, it'll be interesting to see what the future of Flying Sligs is like, especially in terms of gameplay in Oddworld Soulstorm.
Hello, follow me.